Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of VFX Futures at Befores and Afters. I'm Ian Fales, the editor of Befores and Afters. Today we've got a really fun podcast with some of the visual effects and animation team behind that amazing Coldplay BTS My Universe music video, which used a range of visual effects techniques and volumetric video to bring it to life. I just think I've watched this thing about 20 times. Plus the behind the scenes about 20 times. So really excited about that. I'll introduce them now. First is Grant Miller from Ingenuity Studios. Hi Grant, how are you?
Good, good. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. And David Lebensfeld, also from Ingenuity. How's it going, David?
Hey, good. Thanks for having us on.
And also Colin Brady from AMGI. Hi Colin, how are you?
Good, nice to meet you. Good to be here.
The best thing about this video is that it just hits you with all these visuals, which makes you rewatch it multiple times. I feel like I don't do that enough with music videos anymore. But I want to go back to the beginning. Maybe Grant, I can start with you. Like, how did this project happen? How did it come to Ingenuity and elsewhere? And how did, the first kind of conversations take place?
We were originally approached to do the video and had kind of spoken with Dave Myers, the director, about what the creative was and what aspects we felt we could kind of take on, given the capacity crunch that the industry is feeling at large. And it became pretty clear, I think, early in the process on the video that it wasn't going to land just at one studio, and that they were going to have to kind of parse it out and split it up. And that was kind of a major challenge of the job, I would say. But we kind of served as the online house for everyone, and got to really participate with all of the post teams on a level that we're not normally accustomed to. And it was a really pleasant experience overall.
Ingenuity has done such great video, music video work recently. David, what are some of the big projects that you've been doing recently, and how big was this in comparison?
This was obviously enormous. A lot of videos that we do don't end up being a visual effect shot for every single shot of the video. Usually you get a break. In this case, every single shot was a visual effect shot. So it was a lot to manage, and it was a lot to really just frankly do. Some of the projects, if you're somewhat familiar with our work that we've done in the past, we've done a lot of work with Taylor Swift. We did Ed Sheeran video with Dave right before this one, which was a fun video. But we have a long history of doing music videos up until this one. But this was definitely a beast. One of the biggest videos we've done in a long time.
It's actually quite rare for us to not do the whole video ourselves. So I think that really speaks to the volume of work involved. We were happy to have the help.
Yeah, and amongst the other studios, Ingenuity, AMGI, there was also Booth, Rodeo Effects, Territory, and of course Dimension was involved in some of the volumetric work, and other studios. We'll mention those. Colin, I just wanted to ask you, you've had a long history in animation on feature films, and more recently in, I guess, immersive projects. Had you done much music video work prior to this?
No, the only other music video we worked on was the previous one, Higher Power for Coldplay. They did kind of two videos, but they needed one very quickly. And we just started talking to them about a few other projects, and they had their dancers in town, and they said, like, within a couple of days notice, hey, could you guys motion capture these Korean dancers from a dance company called Ambiguous Dance Company? So we brought them in onto our stage, motion captured them, and produced a video in about 2 weeks. And so that was how that first one came about. So Coldplay was very happy with that. And so when Dave Myers was doing this new video, which basically had every kind of visual effect ever put in one video. Dave met with us and said, Coldplay likes your holograms, and we'd like you to add those holograms to this video. But of course, it was an entirely different technique and a different process altogether with this video than we did on the first. But yeah, so technically, this is only the second music video I've ever worked on.
Right. Well, let's talk about some of the different kinds of visual effects in there. Maybe starting with, you know, the volumetric stuff, because that's featured quite a lot in the behind the scenes. Does someone want to jump in and talk about how those were acquired, you know, with the two different bands?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean, I guess we were kind of maybe closest to that part of the process. You know, they shot, in fact, David or Grant, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this stuff, but Coldplay, the music video was shot in Barcelona, but I believe the volumetrics were scanned in London.
Yep.
And then, but then also BTS was in South Korea, and it's my understanding that they were scanned in South Korea. Volumetric scanning is a very expensive process. I don't know how many cameras they have, maybe 60 or something like that. But they, you know, of course, you're capturing the characters in 3D. What's so unique is that it's different data per frame. Every frame essentially is a new piece of geometry. So it's not like traditional CG where you could like grab onto it, hang onto it, attach things to it. And the textures change every frame. So it's a new format that's, I can get really deep and nerdy into, but it's a very difficult, squirrely kind of format to work with. And so we had them all turn into Alembic files. It's natively an MP4 format, a movie file format that has some metadata, which is a crazy cool technology. The metadata is under the hood, but we render primarily in Unreal in our studio. We're a studio that we built our studio around the Unreal Engine, although we do also render in V-Ray and Arnold. But the quantity of shots and characters we had to create, Unreal was really the only solution. However, the textures and the geometry often had a slipping effect. They wouldn't often stick together with the MP4 format. We had to convert everything to Alembics, which is a huge data format. And we had, you know, gigabytes and gigabytes of Alembics to sort through and to transfer from one studio to another. So it was quite a challenge.
Right.
I mean, keep in mind, to jump in, you know, a music video gets edited by an editor. So you have to then sort through all of this data, all of this like footage in quotes to find your characters. And then they're also a band, so it's not one person. It's Colin. How many were there? 5, 4?
Yeah.
So
well,
you have.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. You have the 4 Coldplay members, but then you have 7 BTS members. Right. And so we have 11 dancing 3D characters per shot that have to be carefully rearranged and turned and organized. And the format for naming them, right? Naming those things, that's a different naming convention than what was used to edit the film. So it was every Alembic was kind of a needle in the haystack, and then finding them and then rendering them with reflections in many cases. It was one of the biggest challenges I've ever worked on.
Right. And David, did you mention before that Ingenuity was kind of responsible for the online? Tell me about that overall process from your point of view.
Well, for one, I have to thank Jumana, our producer on the job, who did a fantastic job helping wrangle all of the studio's work. Early on in the project, one of our concerns in dividing up the work was just the level of organization that needed to get done. And also, every shot is really multidisciplinary. You've got backgrounds that are going in by one studio. You've got animated characters that are going in, you know, from AMGI, and you've got holograms that are going in to a spaceship that was rendered by Booth and then coming back to us to add some other material. So us as a studio, we're responsible for the environments for both BTS's background and the Super Soulless Planet. So we did that work, and then on top of that, got work in from other studios, made sure that they got trafficked to the correct studio to add the holograms or whatever, ultimately ended up back in our studio to get finished in the conform. So that was a challenge. It was also challenging in that regard because there are many shots in the video that are transitional. So you start on one, then you go through a wormhole into another, and so all of this work needed to get done in the correct order to then go get traffic to the right studios and back to us. So to say it was just an online is doing a little bit of a disservice. It was extremely challenging. So that was.
You guys are real heroes at the. I mean, I'd like to kind of sing Ingenuity's praises a bit because, yes, having all these studios, even in non-COVID times, would be a challenge. But now you add in, transferring all these files over the internet, and and in the end, Ingenuity was the one that had to piece this together and get all the files together and organize it. So we were extremely thankful that anything that slipped through the cracks really fell on Ingenuity to fix in the end. And so we were very thankful because there even halfway through the process, I think there were many unanswered questions, and it was kind of like, wait, were you doing that part or are we doing that part? And in the end, they were the last ones to really fix everything and make it look great. So we were very thankful that Ingenuity was the lead studio.
Thank you.
It's very kind of you to say. It's definitely a group effort on everyone's behalf. We can piece together the work, but if the work doesn't look great.
Yeah.
To that point, I mean, what was interesting about this process too is that there was a great deal of mutual respect and camaraderie between the studios that are involved. And normally, you split a show and it's a feature, episodic or whatever it is, and that's usually how the music video is not very common to get from studios. But in that workflow, you have someone from the production side who is trafficking all of this stuff or dividing up the work. And in this case, in the music video case, it was us, the studios, who were trying to figure out amongst ourselves who was going to do what, and there wasn't really any like, well, screw them, they're going to go do that, we're not touching it,
right?
Type of attitude. Everyone was really down to help out each other, which was quite nice.
Yeah. And Grant, in terms of Ingenuity's actual visual effects shots, tell me about the process you followed there, because they're a mix of digital environments, the hologram composites, and then lots of fun graphic stuff happening as well. Tell me about some of the specific ones.
Yeah, so we were fortunate enough to have really great concept art going into these that informed a lot of what the creative would be on these environments. But ultimately had to kind of do the task as usual of translating that into 3D and getting it to work with the shots and angles, which was especially in the case of BTS, I think there's a lot of choreography and a lot of really aggressive camera work in a lot of their stuff that necessitated repositioning a lot of things as we got into the shots to make that stuff really work and sing and make the compositions look nice and not just have a water tower behind someone's head or some sort of futuristic space skyscraper that just makes the whole thing that you're just looking bang into and it's all black. So a lot of that, but otherwise we've in the pandemic have just started building a lot of CG environments, and have really we've adopted USD, kind of are working in that. We do a lot of previs and set viz and Unreal, and then typically we'll transfer that back over to Houdini and kind of build the whole environment out in Solaris and have a pretty good multi-shot workflow for doing those kinds of changes where we're adjusting the lighting, adjusting the kind of master scene, moving stuff around per shot to make stuff look right. And that's really what facilitates getting a job like this done on the schedule that we have. If we were needing to go into every shot to make those changes and render stuff out for the 100 shots that we had across the the job, it wouldn't be possible to do that with, you know, a handful of lighters.
Are there particular challenges that come from compositing holograms, volumetric looking holograms, or even just faux holograms? What are some of the things that are challenging there?
Well, I mean, we started, I mean, you know, with the hope that we were going to get the look right and then just give Ingenuity the elements and it would kind of drop right in. But so much of the compositing depends on what the background is. And so I think we realized, you know, pretty early on that Ingenuity would have to take a greater role in balancing out the final look, just because it was kind of different for each shot even. So it wasn't as simple as us just doing the holograms and saying, here, you guys do it. But also, you know, there were several kinds of holograms in the show. There was actual green screen footage of the band members just singing over green screen, which had to look like a hologram in some cases. Other cases, we were using the volumetric data as holograms. And so they're completely different. They couldn't be more foreign in terms of the style of format you're working with. And so getting those looks to roughly sit in the same universe, no pun intended, was I think a real challenge. So yeah, it was quite difficult. And then of course there were little hologram images which were on the spaceship, which were like at little platters. And those are more straightforward. That was very Star Wars-ish in its kind of look. So yeah, it's really, once again, several different techniques, and thankfully, you know, Ingenuity took it all and had to really balance it all together.
Do you have a perspective on that, David or Grant, in terms of, you know, that final look and feel of the holograms?
I mean, Colin hit it right on the head. The hard thing about holograms, and really any sort of transparent stuff in general, is that it's so contingent on what the background is. And because the backgrounds in this case were also computer generated and being worked on at the same time as the holograms, there were just an infinite amount of moving parts. So that was absolutely one of the big challenges here.
You know, one of the techniques that kind of started becoming clear as we were going on was, you know, it was really important for these things to look like holograms, but also Dave Myers, coming from a music video background and having a ton of experience, it was very insightful that he was saying that you always have to get the skin right on the singers. If there's just something through his years of music videos that you can't make it overly washed out or too flat. You had to, the skin had to look like skin. And so ultimately, I think a lot of the process kind of evolved towards keeping the colors a little bit more saturated up top where the faces are, and then as you get lower, to desaturate, and we could even sometimes go a little bit more towards blue, towards the bottom. So it was a little bit like the best of both worlds of trying to find, you know, how to still make these characters look appealing as holograms.
Right. Actually, that's interesting, because music videos traditionally have been heavily graded. I mean, I suppose every project is heavily graded. How did that come into play with the visual effects deliveries, and, you know, what sort of extra grading might happen?
Yeah, it's interesting that the post on them is quite tight. So a lot of the times, especially when we're doing, you know, as is typical in music videos, a lot of work to the background, a lot of work to the overall frame, you know, you can't really color before post, because there's, you know, typically nothing to color or very minimal stuff to color. And if you do, you know, then we're on the hook, you know, as the kind of final line of defense to make sure that the color all matches and looks good. And we'll often end up doing kind of a color pass on our end to tweak that stuff. You know, in this case, we were fortunate enough to kind of have the time on the delivery end to do color kind of after everyone was done, just given how much work there was, and there was a fair bit of balancing among the different vendors in terms of, you know, just overall look and kind of vibe of the whole video that ended up being a bit of a back and forth. But as David mentioned earlier, like, everyone on this project was just kind of had such a nice collaborative spirit that, watching that stuff and making those notes, it felt like we were all working towards kind of a common goal of having everything look cohesive across the job.
Jumad, I want to sing her praises as well, because she was kind of always the face of kind of cohesion as all these different studios are working together. And I was very appreciative that there was always that Ingenuity always brought a calmness to the process, which, it's a little bit like, it's such a fast process. These music videos are the delivery is so fast on these that you don't have time to say, oh, well, this should have been shot in a different way, or this could have been shot here, or you're really just dealing with how to solve this problem right now. And so I was very thankful that just how calm there was. Ingenuity was a very calm voice in the storm every time we would meet all together virtually over Zoom. So she was a big part of this process.
Well, we appreciate that, Colin. That expressly comes from years and years and years of doing insane music videos.
Yeah.
So we're well versed in that. And back to the color thing real quick, and the camaraderie. Stefan Sonnenfeld, who did the color, was also a great member of the team, who did a pre-grade to the work before doing, the heavy VFX, and then on the post side, did a, whatever is referred to as a tape to tape or finishing pass and all the stuff, which really made it sing. To which we provided a bunch of mats and stuff for him to work with, and he was a great partner on it.
Awesome. I have a dumb question about music video visual effects. When you're working on these music videos, I mean, how many times do you think you listen to the song? And do you work with the music while you're working on specific shots? I it's kind of like a dumb question because I guess it's available. But could each of you talk about that side of it? Grant, maybe?
It's not always available.
Okay.
There are a number of jobs we've done where, they'll sing on set with an earwig in and won't play the audio back because everyone now is so kind of secret about the drops for their tracks. And we won't get, the final audio until the night before we're uploading. And it creates all sort of issues with oh, suddenly this is out of sync, or we've not been able to check and test this stuff. And then the flip side of that is it's a music video. So there's a lot of times where we do have stuff that's quite specifically, kind of mapped to the audio. And in remote, you don't really want unreleased audio playing in someone's living room. So we tend to do beat tracks out of editorial with just a flashing, flashing visual red, red dot on the screen to kind of show timing on stuff. Just to, we're very keen to keep stuff secure and, keep everyone happily working from their living rooms.
Yeah, I think that for us too was one of the biggest fears. You're working on something that also has this, groundbreaking collaboration with BTS, and probably the biggest nightmare for anyone is to ever have something leaked from your own studio that will sink your studio. I mean, it can. It would ruin your reputation. And so it's at first, I think you tend to be very protective, overly protective of the music. In the same sense, also going, wow, this is a cool song, or you're the first one to listen to it, and to think, wow, they're rapping in Korean. This is cool in a westernized song, and so that's really neat. But at a certain point, though, you just have to kind of open the floodgates, especially near the end. And we had this robot drummer that we had to add arms to. They initially thought they could puppeteer the arms, and they just couldn't move the arms fast enough. And so we added arms, and at first we thought we were being so clever. We were just kind of motion capturing to basically a click track, as Grant's saying. But in the end, very near the end, they said, can you add drumsticks and really have them go to beat a lot more? So we just needed the whole team of animators to animate really to every drum beat. And that was only possible if they actually were just as close to the music as we are. So yeah, near the end, it kind of loosened up a little bit just because it had to as a team to make sure everyone, but it was kind of a nightmare really, or it was a fear of until finally the song was released, that someone accidentally or somewhere there's a chance of this thing getting leaked to the public. But thankfully, obviously, you know, the crew, you have to trust the crew. It would ruin their reputation as well. But once again, it's stressful. I mean, on any movie, but here's a song that, you know, became a #1 song. So yeah, so it was a lot of fun, but yeah, a little stressful.
To answer your question though, and like you end up listening to the song a lot. You hear it a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. No, I mean, you've done a great job considering that's one of the constraints, I guess I feel as well. So, and of course, David and Grant, you've done so many music videos that you'd be used to that, I expect as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of par for the course, and you definitely learn which songs you actually like after you listen to it 85 times, and then you're like, you know what, let's go for 86. Like,
yeah.
And then you know, you're exhausted, you're beat down by the end of this thing, and then the song comes out, and you're out Ralph's buying some, you know, mozzarella and getting murdered by the memories of last week.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There is something strange the first time you hear it in public.
it feels like you shouldn't be hearing it in public. You're like, oh my God, what's happened?
Oh, that's so cool. Well, I just wanted to wrap up the conversation with a few thoughts on maybe the future of music videos and also particularly volumetric usage. As you say, Colin, like it's a huge data thing. It provides a new way of thinking. But Colin, maybe starting with you, where do you think the future is with that sort of tech, and particularly with, you know, promo music videos?
Well, no, it's huge. I mean, I think it's only starting. We're getting a lot of, you know, different calls for this kind of work. Thankfully, the actual MP4 format is a reasonable size. So once that's dialed in a little bit better with some of the, you know, software and codecs or whatever they're using, I think that has a huge future. And I wish I could even talk more, because I think we're working on stuff that might be under wraps. But you could imagine that once you have volumetric data, the sky's the limit. You can any place that plays movies would have the ability to, at least through a virtual reality or AR headset, you'd be able to see this stuff moving around in any place you can imagine. So I think, and once you have the data, you have it forever, and you could use it a variety of ways. So it's kind of the gift that keeps on giving. It's a pain to get it first, and you can never change it. You can never alter it, but you do have their likeness and all the wonderful clothing, the folds of the fabric and all that stuff that you'd have to simulate otherwise. You have that stuff forever. And it's very, very exciting what the possibilities are with that data.
What about you, David? What's your perspective on that side of things in your industry?
I think there's a big technical hurdle, I think, to get over. I think it's very useful for some of the stuff that Colin was describing. The frame by frame new mesh aspect is a big hurdle. I think to use in more traditional VFX workflows.
Yeah.
You know, it becomes very difficult if you want to change somebody's shirt with a CG shirt to get that to work. But I think from a capture and playback direct standpoint, it's really amazing tech. But you know, like any of this type of stuff, it's all new and will continue to get better.
Yeah.
How about you, Grant?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the data format, as kind of Colin touched upon, just needs to improve and be supported more. You know, we did a job with, was that Sony we did that job with, Dave? Or Canon?
We did a job with Canon.
Canon. We did a volume capture job with Canon, and had the same hurdles that Colin spoke about. Yeah. You know, we converted it, brought everything in, converted everything to an alembic per frame, giant pain in the butt. Yeah. The edit sucks. You know, like you're not dealing with footage in the traditional sense and that makes it a challenge. Whereas if it's an MP4 format and you're editing it like normal and working with like normal, you can cut it like normal, and then the volume data is just there, you know? So I think the support, like all things in visual effects that do gain traction and gain adoption, will be really kind of the tipping point. You know, we saw the same thing with Deep when it came out. No one used it, and then suddenly it was supported everywhere. And now, you know, it's how we did all of this job, you know? So I think it'll be a thing like that probably. And then with regard to, you know, to the latter portion of the question, just the, you know, kind of the future of music videos as a whole, you know, as a studio, they're some of our favorite jobs. There's certainly a lot of my favorite jobs are the music videos. I think it's a very rare format where you have just a wild amount of creativity and can bring a ton of artistry in a very compact, you know, timeline to the screen. And I think that's why you have, you know, we've kind of seen like a resurgence of the big music videos that they had in the, you know, in the 90s and the 2000s, you know, because the artists need it as a way to connect with their fans in this, you know, in this kind of mixed up world that we're living in currently. You know, so you can still tell your story, you can still, you know, kind of get your art out there, you know, in a visual format and in a creative capacity that, you know, you wouldn't have that venue if it weren't for music videos. So
absolutely, I want them to be bigger and better. And, you know, can we just say this particular music video has, I think, 81 million views on YouTube, which is maybe not surprising for BTS and Coldplay, but it is incredible, and I think you should be really proud of it. I wanted to give a really quick shout out again to Dimension and their Polymotion stage, and I think it was Jump Studios in South Korea, which handled the volumetric shoot. There's a bunch of other companies. We'll put credit list in the show notes for this. But guys, it's been really fun talking about this huge project. Thank you for taking the time, David, Grant, and Colin. Really great to have you on VFX Futures.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Good to be here. Thank you
for having us. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for listening. See you later. Bye.